First asked permission from Thanajan Jandi and the members of the Sangha to speak on the Dhamma to you, and express my delight to be here again in Bandara Uttama Buddhist Society, as we shorten it to BUBS. So it's lovely to be back here. It's been about, I think, 6 years since I last visited. Seems a long time, but it seems very familiar having arrived again, even though it has been 6 years since I was last here. And the reason it seems very familiar because you've looked after this Buddha Center very well physically, but also to see many familiar faces and also to meet new faces, new people who, from a Buddhist perspective, we reflect on the words of the Buddha that there must be some connection between us to have this association, especially those people who I've known over many, many years. In the Buddha's teachings, the Buddha himself said, the reason we meet in this world, in this lifetime, is because we've had some association in the past with being mother, father, brothers, sisters, relatives or friends in this life or in the past. And that is why we have connection again in this time, in this occasion, in this place. And so in Thai there's a word called yati tham, which means we're relatives in truth, relatives in the Dhamma. So we may not be related by blood relationship, but we're related by our commitment to truth, our commitment to virtue, our commitment to goodness, our commitment to the Buddhist path. And that's what unifies us, and that makes us feel a sense of closeness. Even though, I've been living in Thailand and you're here in Malaysia and some people in Singapore have come tonight. You're living separately, but there is a connection of almost being in the same boat, travelling the ocean to cross over from the realm of suffering to Nibbana, enlightenment. And that is the teachings of the Buddha. The teachings of the Buddha is like a raft or a boat which is intended to lead beings to climb onto that raft and begin paddling and begin the journey to cover the ocean to eventually reach the safe shore. The shore which is free from greed, hatred and delusion. The shore which is free from COVID. The shore which is free from the trials and tribulations that many of you have been through in the last 2 or 3 years. It is the shore of freedom, the shore of release, the shore of liberation from all suffering, which we call Nibbana. And so we're on that boat together. And some people on the boat have to be the leaders to encourage everyone to help paddle, to paddle in unison, and also to help pump out the water. Because sometimes on the boat when you're travelling on a journey, it starts to fill up with water, and we have to help to take the water out of that boat. We have to help to paddle. Some people get tired and discouraged, and so it is the important responsibility of the leaders on the boat to give encouragement, to give inspiration, and to give you the faith and confidence that you're doing it for a purpose, and that purpose is to reach the further shore. And even though you can't see the shore yet, even though the waves are very heavy, the sharks are circling, the whirlpools are swirling, there's a storm blowing. If we keep our confidence and trust in the Buddha's path, keep on putting in effort, then we can, all of us, reach that further shore. And so my role and Ajahn Jandi's role and the monks here is to give that encouragement and support to you, and especially in your commitment to the Buddha's path, your practice, to give you inspiration, hopefully to encourage you, to inspire you, to lift you up, and to put in that daily practice. And we've seen that in the last 2 or 3 years with the COVID epidemic throughout the world, it's had a huge impact on all countries and is still having an impact to this day. Maybe less, but it's still having an impact. And it is a good reflection, because we can see that how important having the right view of the Buddha's teachings helps us to understand what was going on. We could see that the Buddha taught that there is illness. It is just a natural cause, natural consequence of having a physical body. And when you have lots of physical bodies in the world, then there will be dis-ease, there will be aging, there will be sickness, there will be passing away. It's not what people desire and want and wish for, but it is a natural event, a natural phenomena. It's not the first time or the last time such an event will happen in this world. And so as a Buddhist who has developed an understanding of the Buddha's teachings, he pointed out that there is a sense of imperfection in the world, what we call dukkha, the Pali word dukkha. And the Pali word dukkha is a very profound, a very deep word. It means from unpleasantness, stress or strain, to torture, death, agony, and the coarsest forms of suffering, to the most refined forms of discomfort and unpleasantness in the body and mind. And so that dukkha arises because of what? Why is there this distress, imperfection in the world? It's because the fundamental nature of all phenomena is to be impermanent. There is nothing in the physical or mental world which is permanent. And that's a fundamental truth that the Buddha saw. That's why the Buddha was a great scientist, incredible scientist, because he actually looked at the reality of the physical and the mental world and said, what occurs? What are the truths of this physical and mental world? And as nuclear physicists will understand, one of the fundamental truths on the subatomic level and also on the macro level, as well as the micro level, is that everything is in a state of change and flux. It is shifting. It is not stable for any long period of time. And because of that, because things will change and deteriorate over time and become otherwise, then there's an imperfection. That's the underlying imperfection in things. So if you are looking for what's perfect, trying to get what's perfect, stable and secure in the world, then you're not understanding truth and nature as it really is. It is normal that people want stability. It is normal that people look for what's going to last. But the reality is we have to accept with wisdom, what we're really looking for is not what we can find. And so when we start to at least intellectually accept that the Buddha saw that and pointed that out, that everything is unstable, it is always shifting, it is always changing, therefore I should expect things to change. Then we can prepare ourselves for the instabilities and changes of life, can't we? So instead of expecting things to be permanent and everlasting, then we can expect the opposite. Because if we're saying it shouldn't change, we shouldn't think like that. If we're saying that shouldn't happen or that person shouldn't change, then we're making a big mistake. It is the nature that they will change. And so when we start to adjust our likes and preferences, which is our preferences as human beings is for things to be stable and permanent and secure. When we adjust that, that's our likes, that's what we wish for, to acceptance of the reality as things are, that they will change, they are impermanent, they're unstable. Then when we're seeing things according to the way nature is, then we can be more at peace. We're not in conflict with truth, with ultimate truth. We may not wish that to be that way, but that's the way it is. And that's the way people are to change. And so this is this developing right view, because during this period of COVID, a lot of people wouldn't be able to come to this centre. I don't think you're open during that period. A lot of people couldn't come to our monasteries. We had to lock down. Very strict rules. And then people became isolated, had to stay in lockdown at home, couldn't go to work. And a lot of people I found struggled with meditation because they were struggling because their mind was not in acceptance of the experience they were going through, the experience of this pandemic, this illness, which was taking over the world and destroying a lot of their goals and aspirations. They were employed and then suddenly unemployed, or they had plans to travel and they couldn't travel. They wanted to visit family but they couldn't visit, etc., etc. And I'm sure you understand everything I'm saying. So many people throughout the whole world, in almost all countries, were challenged in their worldview. What's going on? Why is this happening? Why can't people do something about it? Why can't the government control this? And everyone struggled with that, dealing with the physical issue, but a lot of times dealing with the mental situation that was going on. And that's why meditation in isolation, just trying to make your mind peaceful, is not always enough in the Buddhist path. We have to begin from right view. So when we begin the Noble Eightfold Path, I'm sure all of you know the chanting, right view, sammaditthi. Right view is the first step on the path to liberation. And that right view is, how should we look at the world? How do we look at the world in the way a Buddha looks at the world? The way the Buddha pointed out that the world actually is. Not how we would like it to be, how we would wish it to be, or how Disney presents it to be, but how it actually is. And so when we start to read, what did the Buddha say about how the world is, then we start to align our own perception. Is our own perception in accordance with the way the Buddha is looking how the world is? And if our view is not according to the way the Buddha saw truth, it means we're going against truth. We're fighting against reality. And if we're fighting against reality, we will suffer. Because we're fighting against nature. And one of the fundamental truths that the Buddha saw and taught is that everything is subject to change. Everything is subject to imperfection because it is unstable. And so when we start to look at that, we can also start to apply that in our daily lives. So when change happens in a very dramatic way, as we saw recently with the lockdowns and all that, then we can say, oh, this is the way it is. We're expecting that. We didn't maybe necessarily know that it will happen exactly that way, but oh yes, that is the way of nature. There will be change, and it will change again. It will go through cycles. The sun comes up and the sun goes down. Yes? The rain clouds come, the rain clouds go. Illness comes, illness goes. Birth happens, passing away happens. When we start to see that in an overview, then we step back from just what we want, what we desire, and start to see, oh yes, this is how it's happening. And so there's a sense of peace in the wisdom of right understanding. So that's why right view, seeing things correctly, is important because it gives us access to truth. We start to see aligning with the way reality is, the way Dhamma is. Dhamma, it means nature. It means truth, but it's the truth of nature. So we're starting to see the truth of nature, the truth of the natural laws. And when we start to view things according to the truth of the natural laws, then we'll find we'll get more and more skilled and wise, and that will make our lives more peaceful. For example, if we're expecting people to always please us and make us happy, will we be disappointed one day? Yes. So, one of Ajahn Chah's good advice is, don't give your heart away to others. Yes? Worship the goodness within yourself. And if other people respect and love and worship that goodness as well, so that's a blessing. If no one does, you haven't lost anything. But if you expect other people, I give my heart to this person, you always make this heart happy, joyous, never disappoint this heart, yes, forevermore. Is that wise? Is that going to lead to disappointment? Yes, because it's impossible. We find even sometimes our own heart doesn't please us. How can somebody else please us all the time, every time, forevermore? It won't happen. So when we have that understanding, it is that the nature of foolishness to actually do that, to expect others to always be kind to us, say the right thing, say what's pleasing, to make us content. When we give that up, I don't expect that anymore from other people, and we come back, I will change that within myself. I will make this mind as skillful, as peaceful, as wholesome, as virtuous, as wise as I possibly can. And then if other people respect that or don't, then that's up to them. You will be at peace. So that is where we have, when we start to view things in terms of that they're unstable, they're always changing, then it allows us that wisdom and that view to adapt to the nature of the world, the changeability of the world. And so then we start to speak more wisely. You know, if I say, tomorrow I'm definitely going back to Thailand, Ajahn Chah says, I'm not a wise monk. But if I say, tomorrow I have an airline ticket to go back to Thailand, but whether that happens or doesn't happen depends on many circumstances, it's uncertain, then that's a wiser statement, because one never knows. A monk I know recently contacted me and he says, I'm definitely coming. He went to Nepal to visit his mother who had passed away. His father had passed away, and went to visit his mother to give her support. And he said, I'm definitely coming back on this date. And he got to the ticket counter, and of course what happened, he hadn't done the right forms and he couldn't get on the plane, and he ended up staying for another month because all the flights were booked. So that's an example of that things don't always go as we expect. So we always have to have this quality of uncertainty in the background. That we know that things are uncertain. Maine, the Thai word is maine. And one of the things when you go and live with Ajahn Chah, you know, when I first went there I couldn't speak hardly any Thai. I quickly learnt one word I'd hear all the time from Ajahn Chah, maine. Yes? I don't know what the equivalent is in Malay. What's the equivalent? Uncertain. What's the equivalent in Malay, or even Chinese? Uncertain. What's that? You can't tell me? No one can tell me what's the Malaysian for uncertain? Huh? Say, Tatan Pu. Tatan Pu. Tatan Pu. Okay, well, I got Tatan Pu. Okay, uncertain. So you have to be prepared for Tatan Pu. Yes? Say that word over and over again in your mind. Yes? It should become your mantra for life. Yes? Because many of us, when we learn meditation, we take up a mantra of, Samma Arahang Buddho, or even one of the Amni Padme Yes? We have these mantras that we say over and over again as chants in the mind. We need to say the chant Attam Pu over and over again in the mind as a mantra. A mantra, it's uncertain, it's not sure. Remind ourselves that things will change. And also, it doesn't necessarily mean that things are always going to change to the bad. Sometimes we have to remind ourselves when things are not going well, Attam Pu, it'll change, yes? It'll change. And that reminder, not to get sort of disappointed or distressed or depressed, that even this too will change. With time, things change. And so that right view, seeing right view, and because things change, that does cause tension and stress. Why does it cause tension and stress in human beings and animals and devas and non-enlightened beings? is because it goes against their aspirations, their desires, their wishes, their cravings, their desires. We want things to be a certain way. We want the world to be a certain way. We want people to be a certain way. We want ourselves to be a certain way. And it's not that. It's always changing. And therefore, when things start to disintegrate and break up and change, then there's a conflict with the desire. So what's the problem here? The Buddha said it's the desire's the problem, because the desire is going against the reality of nature. The nature is to break up and decline. We have these flowers on the shrine. Do you know why we offer flowers to the Buddha? Firstly, there is what we call amita puja. It's the offering of flowers, candles, incense, scented waters. The Buddha said that is great merit in offering those as a recollection of the Enlightened One. But also, they're a symbol of the human body, that we will use this body to worship the Buddha. But this body is like these flowers. It is impermanent and unsatisfactory. At this moment, these flowers are blossoming and beautiful in perfection. That's why we put them on the shrine. But after a few weeks, maybe not even that, they will start to fade, decline, rot and pass away. And you'll end up wanting to throw them out. So too, it's a reminder, the physical human body is like that. We can use this body to do good in the world, to do kind acts, to share, to sacrifice acts of generosity and kindness. And when we do that, that's worshipping the Buddha Dhamma Sangha. It's an offering, a gift to the Buddha Dhamma Sangha. But it's also to remind us that this body will eventually grow old and fade and pass away. So then we have that right view. Oh, I don't need to be absolutely obsessed with this body. It's just its nature. It will eventually get ill, it will eventually get sick, it will eventually, hopefully, a long period of time, pass away. So when we start to view that, at least we're starting to see according to reality, rather than I want only to get well, I only want to be healthy, I only want to be free of sickness, I never want to get COVID. Yes? Some people go so obsessed with trying to avoid COVID that they almost went a bit crazy. I know a few of my disciples became almost paranoid. Seriously, they would kind of lock themselves almost in jail at home, and not have any contact with anybody, and worried. It was absolute fear that was kind of driving. You could understand them not wanting to get ill and avoiding and doing the right things, and that all the doctors recommended. But this was gone to the obsession. It's gone to the thing where they couldn't sleep at night out of fear that they was going to get COVID. And strangely enough, they ended up getting COVID. Some of the people who tried to avoid it the most are the ones that ended up getting it. And that's why some of the acharyas started talking about as not at COVID, they call it the madness disease. Yes, and not in the sense that we shouldn't be, obey the kind of the regulations and doing all that and doing our best to look after our health and look after other people's health, but not to the point where fear of the illness becomes such a burden that we can't function properly, can't eat, can't sleep, and are stressed. That is where we can see this obsession the desire to be free of something becomes a fear of that thing. And that's a danger. That's not a right mental attitude, a quite destructive mental attitude as well. So we can see that when we have this development of right view, we see that, oh yes, things are impermanent, things will change. We see that, oh, that leads to suffering or dissatisfaction. Or sometimes I like to say imperfection, because really we, as human beings, we want to find what's perfect. And a lot of people are looking for the best. They buy the best kind of watch or the best type of car. They seek that out in life. If someone says to you, I'm going to give you something that's okay, you say, well, I'd like a good quality. You want to find something which is permanent and lasting and the best and perfection. If you are a person who seeks what's perfect, you're going to suffer a lot in life, because you always find some defect in something. And if you don't find it, someone else will find it in that object. Nothing is absolutely perfect except a Samma Buddha. A Samma Buddha is perfect. Perfect in right view and understanding, perfect in liberation, perfect in mind, perfect in action and speech, perfect in teaching, perfect in wisdom and comprehension and understanding, and perfect in their teachings. Because they have spent many, many lifetimes, endless lifetimes, creating that perfection, perfecting the paramitas we call. That's why we give always deep reverence to the Buddha, because of his commitment to liberate all of us, because he made a commitment not only for his own liberation, but to become a Samma Buddha, a fully enlightened Buddha who teaches to liberate out of compassion other beings in the world. And all of us here tonight are blessed to have received those teachings. So the Buddha's practice was for all of us. And so when we make our own practice, we do that as an offering to the Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha, to repay the debt of gratitude to him, and so that we follow that path. And so there's teaching of impermanence, which leads to suffering. It doesn't just end there. The Buddha is saying that that desire can be abandoned. We don't have to become a slave to desire. When we realize that desire is the problem, that we're not accepting nature as it really is, and we change our view and start to see the way nature is, then we start to abandon our desires and obsessions. When we start to abandon that, then there's liberation. And that's one of the great skills of Ajahn Jandiza, my own teacher, Ajahn Chah, was that many people ask me, why are so many Western monks, as well as Thai monks, drawn to Ajahn Chah? And it was really his wisdom aspect of teaching. Ajahn Chah did not solve your problems for you. He would give you the understanding and the skills for you to comprehend the problem and solve it yourself. There's that saying, which is not very Buddhist, it's better to give a man the skills to catch fish than to give him one fish. It's not very Buddhist, but teaching him how to fish. So that kind of principle was very much how Ajahn Chah approached his teaching of Dhamma. He wouldn't sort of overcome your problem right here and right now necessarily, but he'd give you the understanding of how to look at that problem and solve it yourself. And one of the things that he would do was point out that if you are suffering, are not happy, you've got disappointments or tension, stress in your life, it's because of two things. What are the two? You want something or you want to get rid of something. So if you're noticing that there's unhappiness, negativity, depression, whatever, tension in your life, what is it you're demanding or wanting? Ask yourself that. Or is it, what is it I want to get rid of? Sometimes it's what we want to get rid of. I want to get rid of the bad habits of the person I'm living with. Or I want to get rid of, this annoying situation. I want to get rid of this mosquito. I want to get rid of something that's unpleasant and suffering and replace it with something which is more desirable. So we either want to get rid of something or want to get something. And so that is a very, very simple net to catch your fish. If you ask yourself, whenever there's tension in the mind, in your life, what do I want? And just ask and listen to what the mind's screaming for. Sometimes the mind is screaming, I want this to be this way. Life to be this way. It's unfair that it's not this way. You see that very clearly. If you abandon that desire, you go to peace. You go to cessation. You cessate the desire. You bring the desire to an end, then that leads to peace. If there's a demand, I don't want that, I don't like that, I can't have that in my life, that also causes suffering. If you abandon that, then you go to peace. And that was the great skill, Ajahn Chah, amongst many of the things he taught, but that was one of those fundamentals, that he gave that wisdom to you to understand the Buddha's teachings. This is the principle of looking at desire, either for something or wanting to get rid of something. If you abandon that, that leads to liberation. You can take that anywhere, any country. That's why the monks from Ajahn Chah's tradition have been able to go to England, France, America, Australia, all over the world, many cultures, many environments, come to Malaysia and teach that truth, because it's a fundamental truth. It is a law of nature that if you abandon desire, then peace arises. That truth is something that we can all use in our lives. Excuse me. The truth of a tickly throat. And that's what we call liberation, isn't it? And that's the freedom. When there's freedom from desire, then there's liberation. And that liberation, then, that is why then the Buddha taught the Noble Eightfold Path. And that Noble Eightfold Path, from right view right up to right concentration, samadhi up to samadhi, is 8 steps towards liberation. How do we develop the abandoning of desire? How is that done? And basically it boils down to 3 principles in the kind of Noble Eightfold Path. Is the Sila, Samadhi, Panya. Is virtue, because in virtue, by keeping the 5 precepts, for example, or the 8 precepts, you're giving up coarse desires. And you're giving up coarse action of body and speech, which is motivated by selfishness, self-desires, cruelties. And then when we develop a sense of tranquility and peace, training the mind, purifying the mind, then we're giving up the attachments to this body, to control, to thoughts and moods and feelings, and bringing that to stillness, calming things down. So we're giving up the attachments connected with body and feelings, perceptions, thoughts and consciousness, and bringing it to stillness. And then the last part, the wisdom, is the actually seeing things as they actually are, seeing the nature of things. And that is seen through this pure and calm state of mind. So you'll notice that, say, when you come to a centre like this, just become aware before you sit meditation, how's my mind? Ask yourself, how's my mind? And you may notice that it's stressed or anxious, you've been busy in the day and a lot of activity, work and responsibilities, lots of things going on. Then doing the meditation, sitting, watching the breath, counting the breath or doing a mantra, after an hour or 20 minutes, however long you sit, then just, whether you're peaceful or not, ask yourself at the end, how's my mind? And just observe. And generally, you'll see that the mind has calmed down or improved to some degree. So that's an indication that even though maybe you feel, I'm not getting enlightened in my meditation on this session, I wasn't that peaceful, but there is a shift in the state, the quality of mind. The meditation has helped the mind settle down. And when the mind is settled down, we can start to see it more clearly. We start to see reality more clearly. And we'll catch ourselves, we'll catch our desires much more quickly. We'll start to see and learn to kind of abandon the desires. We'll start to see, do I need to go shopping online every day? Yes? That's a home truth. I'll even say that in Thailand, some of the ladies who come to the monastery, they use the monks as an excuse to go shopping. They tell the husbands, I'm going to get something for the monks or for the monastery. But then they go and get lots of extras that are not necessary for the monks. It's the defilement of shopping. Yes, you know that defilement? There's greed, hatred and delusion, and then the defilement of shopping, which is often there's wanting, wishing for some kind of gratification. And we buy all these things, and then sometimes, we don't actually use them so much, or use them a few times, and then we put them in storage. And you'll realize how much stuff you have if you have to ever move home. Yes, you'll realize you've got a lot of stuff. And I often give the suggestion, particularly to women, that maybe go home and open the cupboards and look in and say, what dresses have I worn in the last 3 years? Or what clothes have I worn in the last 3 years? And which am I keeping for a special day and never put on or haven't worn? And is it necessary to keep that? Maybe there's somebody who's poorer or in need more, who I could take that and give it to, and it'll bring great joy to them, great pleasure to them, and they'd make use of it every day. And then we can do a clean out. Yes? That's just a practical thing, because that's how sometimes we're keeping things for a rainy day. It's like investment into the future, but the future is so uncertain. Future changes dramatically. But that, a lot of people think, therefore I have to keep more, just in case it changes. And they're just driven by fear of going without. It's actually, there's a beautiful saying, I think all of you have read it, where the Buddha's talked about dana. And if beings knew and realized the results of generosity, as I know and see the results of generosity, then they wouldn't go even have one meal without sharing, even if it was their last meal. The act of sharing and generosity and giving brings things back to us. And with the monks, we know that. It's really interesting, this phenomena. Like Ajahn Jandi's monastery is very well supported. My own monastery is relatively well supported as well. And so sometimes we get, for example, get a lot of rice that's brought, and so I send it off to sometimes the school for the blind. There's other places, other monasteries share it out, and it's really strange. You send off a truckload of things or a carload of things in the morning. The next evening, a car comes and they offer the same amount or even more, and it comes back. And it's really uncanny. But you start to see, oh yes, this is a truth. The Dhamma is very profound, very subtle, but it is true. And you can see it happening, witness it for yourself and not for yourself. So that gives you a lot of confidence in the Buddha's teachings when he says to be share and give things. So look to see what you have in excess and maybe think, oh, okay, that's not necessary now. I can share that. Some of those things don't need to store. Because if you don't share it, then when you pass away, your children will share it out. Yes? So maybe you should do something about it. So we see, I'll just summarize now that you see the four aspects of the Four Noble Truths. We have this, because things are impermanent and things are changing, then we have unsatisfactoriness. That unsatisfactoriness is because we have the desires for things to not change. When we abandon desire, that leads to liberation, enlightenment. And there is a pathway to enlightenment. And that pathway begins at this first step of right view. So when we talk about someone having right view, what we mean is that they actually look at the world in terms of these four things. They look to see things will change. Will it change? And they look to see whether, do I have a desire? What are my desires? And what's causing me tension and suffering and stress? And then looking towards, okay, trusting the abandoning of desire to free the mind up and committing oneself to the path of abandoning desire through the Noble Eightfold Path. So this is a Dhamma talk as a reflection on the Buddha's teachings and right view, right understanding. And you'll find that the more you develop that right view and right understanding, it'll help to make the mind more peaceful, more calm, in your life more peaceful, more calm as well, to deal with the changing nature of existence.